Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Zoning Review Committee meeting of January 21st, 2025. We will open the meeting with introductions and then a quick explanation of the Zoom requirements and changes that we've had to make. Oh, I guess everybody can see everyone, so we don't really have to do introductions. Colin, do you want to explain what's happened with Zoom and how we have a new link and so forth?
You got it. So due to the town recently upgrading its Zoom, the link changed at the last minute, as you all recently saw. We've updated the town's website with the correct link. However, because that change was made relatively last minute, I would recommend that the board not take any votes tonight. Certainly, Bob could present the information he has, you could ask questions, but because somebody from the public may have been trying to access with an old link, my advice would be that we not take any votes. So I'd recommend tabling the meeting minutes, which is really the only vote that I was looking to have you all take this evening. And any votes that need to be taken, we'll take at the next meeting. This is being recorded, so anything that's presented tonight will be online for anybody else to see. But because that link changed, somebody may have the old one, and it would be slightly risky for you to take a vote. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, so we will not be voting on minutes tonight. We will move that off to our next meeting to be determined at the end of this meeting. So with that, I will turn things over to Bob and potentially Judy to discuss the remaining grants and updates and kind of go over the stuff that you sent us today on Friday. So Bob, take it away.
Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Here we are again in 2025, talking about zoning. So I guess as you all know, there was still some money in the account for the zoning recodification project, and we talked about what that could be used for. There were, as you probably will recall, as we went through the process, there were a number of more substantive issues that were put on a sort of phase 2 list if we had the ability to tackle any of them. And definitions was one that came up multiple times, and it was decided that that would be the one we would tackle to begin this process again. And that would entail, you know, concentrating on the definition sections of the bylaw, which is a pretty, it's a pretty good section. It's a pretty elaborate section, but there were comments made during the whole process about it probably needs a more in-depth look-see. There are some definitions that may be missing that might need to be in there. We should probably take a look to see if how each one of those definitions is written still makes sense, if it is still understandable, or if it needs tweaking or editing, and so forth and so on. So you have the both the definition section, section 11 of the new bylaw for tonight, for references as we go through this. And then I put together this just a quick sort of comparison, if you will. I was looking at a few things. So I looked at what are the uses in the use table, and did they have definitions or not? Now, it's not always necessary to have a definition for every use in the use table, but you want to see which ones do and don't. Even looking earlier than that, going back a few years now, this is back in 2022, so it's almost 3 years ago, when the Barrett Planning Group, Judy and I did an audit of your bylaw, and we one of the sections we looked at then was definitions, and we said, well, there are some definitions, there are some terms that we normally would recommend that they be in the bylaw if you have those terms in the bylaw, or even if you don't have those terms in the bylaw, but they are new terms.
Mhm.
Electric vehicle charging station being one of those new terms that towns
Right.
adopting into their zoning bylaws. But you have some, you had some like adult daycare, you know, and use is defined in state statute, and um, animal daycare is another issue that comes up a lot.
Oh.
And, you know, having a crystal ball, we said accessory dwelling unit before we knew the state was ever going to adopt accessory dwelling unit legislation, which it now has, and there's definitions there. And that's really something the town would want to have in its bylaw. So you have a few there. In comparing the table of uses and definitions, I didn't really find too much conflict or missing things. One was there is a use in the table of uses called self-service gas station, but there's no definition of it. And then you have another use referred to as a motor vehicle service station. And there's a definition for that, and I think that's something we need to look at in terms of, do you need two separate categories, and are they really two separate things, two separate uses? To resolve that, the thing I noticed the most was that there were terms in the definition, in the table of uses, that had almost the equivalent in the definition section, but they were inconsistent as to how they were referenced. So that's more of just a cleanup than it is a substantive issue. So that's something we can go through and make some recommendation on. And then, of course, you have terms in the definition section that don't relate to the table of uses. You have terms that relate to different sections, the marijuana section and the solar section of the bylaw, and just general terms about like affordable housing and moderate income housing, and a variety of other terms that show up in the bylaw in various other sections. What I didn't get to check entirely was, are there definitions in the definition section that don't have an equivalent use in the bylaw somewhere? Which would raise the question, why is there a definition for a term you don't use? That's work that's sort of the next step we need to do, I would say. The other next step that we need to do, we being Judy and I, along with the committee, but the other next step is, we haven't actually, at least I haven't, I don't think Judy has either, but you can correct me, Judy, actually gone through the definition section and read every single definition. Have you done that, Judy?
No, I have skimmed them. I have not studied them in depth.
Right.
There's some interesting language.
Right, that's the point, you know?
Yeah.
How are they written? Does it still make sense the way they're written? Do they need updating? Are they confusing and need some editing or rewriting? Those kind of issues that we often find in definition sections. So those are the two of the next steps is, you know, seeing if there are definitions there that don't exist anywhere in the bylaw, and for us to go through reading the definition sections and highlighting any issues, problems, concerns, whatnot, for each one of the definitions. And then I went through the accessory use section of the bylaw. And even though I was looking for connecting that to the definition sections, I found, as we often do when we go through there, a red flag question, but I'll get to that in a second. So you can see the little table I put together. A few of the accessory uses have definitions like solar system
Mhm.
and all the different kinds of different solar systems. None of the others do. And there's a couple in there that I would, and Judy can jump in on this too, but there's a couple in there that we normally recommend towns have for definitions. One would be home occupation.
Right.
It's unusual to see a bylaw without a definition of home occupation. And another one possibly could be mobile homes
Which really should be manufactured housing.
or manufactured housing.
Yeah, it really should be updated.
Yeah.
It's not
Um,
mobile home anymore.
Right. So, and then you can see the other list of items that do not have definitions. Now, getting to my little kind of red flag that I found, the first section of the accessory bylaws, the first subsection is your kitchen sink subsection. So included in just that first section is private garage, carport, solar system, greenhouse, tool shed, barn, swimming pool, and tennis court. That's all in one section, subsection. And then the other listings all are standalone accessory uses. Now, the anomaly is that you can see greenhouse is in the first, is in the third line of the table, and there's no section, there's no definition section, but greenhouses are allowed without any conditions. But then you get down to the last line of the accessory, and once again, greenhouse is listed, and there it's subject to conditions.
Mhm.
So there's inconsistency there. And so that the greenhouse issue needs to be tackled a little bit and figured out. It's another one of those, like, well, you know, what's the difference between a self-service gas station and a motor vehicle service station? Well, what's the difference between a greenhouse and a greenhouse? So, you know, there are some glitches here that we've discovered. Yeah, and then this initial review that I did over the last couple of days, so that's where we are right now. We have comments or questions or thoughts or whatever at this point, we'll be happy to discuss.
All right, Bob, thank you very much, and Judy. I
Aye.
did go through everything today. Read through everything, not, crazily, but in the very first section where it says adult use marijuana retailer. Maybe Colin, if we could switch over to the actual bylaws, and this is from the May 2023 version.
That's the correct updated version, so.
Okay, so in the first section, it's the second line, or and otherwise are combined together. I mean, that's a grammatical thing that just should be fixed.
So you were in the marijuana section?
No, but it's adult
Adult
use.
use.
So
I'm
page,
sorry, I'm
page
sorry.
2 in what I'm looking at. So we
And
go scroll
what
down to the
line?
next page, Colin. Yep, right there where it says adult use.
Adult marijuana retailer?
Yep, the second line where towards the end, it says sell or otherwise, that there should be a space in between or and otherwise. I know I'm being nitpicky, but
Oh, or otherwise, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
space,
I mean,
yeah.
it's stupid, but it's there and it should be
No,
fixed.
no, it's, you wanna have, you don't wanna confuse people by jumbling words together.
In the next one I'm looking at is commercial recreation, which is,
There it is.
so it lists a whole bunch of different things. Do we
Yep.
really need to list out things? And if we are going to list them out, do we have to have a more complete list? I mean, we're gonna have pickleball coming up. Do we need to
Yep.
add that, or do we just say, okay, well, it's or other sports related to social events? I
Right.
guess that's a question really.
Game courts. Various game courts.
Okay. So we don't need to list anything there, I guess.
Yeah,
Well-
this is just a general comment about lists like this.
Yeah,
There is never a time when you can list every possible thing in the
Right.
list. You're never gonna list every single recreational activity, and if you think you have, within 6 months, it's out of date. So it's, towns like to list things, but there's always something left out, and so saying, other sports or sporting related, saying other things like this, or other similar activities or other sport is the way to kind of cover everything else that's not in the list.
so would it be better to eliminate some of the things that are listed or just leave it the way it is? I guess would be. I mean, I don't know how much you want and how much you don't want.
I mean, this is your existing language from your
Right.
existing, bylaw. We didn't add this in, so, um, um, it's a kind of a kitchen sink of uses. It's all over the place.
Right.
Roller skating, to wrestling, to football, and, lacrosse and whatever. There's no
Real category here.
real category here except, commercial recreation, some kind of commercial. These are commercial activities. These are businesses and not, playing, not going, whatever, playing soccer out on a public park somewhere or something like that.
Well, we do have a sports center that does have outside activities, so I
Right.
didn't know if, well, at any rate, that was something that came across, and I see it, like you said, it's multiple times. There's lists of activities or lists of things that come up that it's like, how extensive do we want that list to be, or is there a way to make it smaller, or does that just invite more problems? So I wasn't sure about that. So I wanted to
It's
ask
been
you.
in your bylaw for who knows how long, and if it hasn't been an issue, and it does, it doesn't raise any major red flag. I mean, you could list fewer, you could list more. There's no magic number, so it's not a problem. It's not a problem.
Other than perhaps it might make sense to reorganize that list some, because it's kind of a real jumble the way it is now.
Okay, yeah,
I mean, there are really sort of categories embedded in here, and it might be good to just reorganize them.
okay.
Yeah.
If we could move on to daycare facility. So it says any facility operated on a regular basis that receives children not of common parentage.
Yep.
What does that mean?
It's not, the people who are caring for the kids are not their parents.
Okay, all right.
I mean, there's an easier definition of childcare than what you've got here, but that's the concept.
Okay, that totally confused me. I didn't go and
Yeah.
wait.
It's old, that's old wording, very
Okay.
old.
Well, maybe we can come up with something that will
Yeah.
be a little more up to date on that then, or a better
Yeah,
way.
there's actually a state definition for childcare center, so we could just update this.
Okay, that would be one on my list to do.
Sure.
Educational use would be the next one, which I didn't really understand at all. I mean, there's no building or facility that's 100,000 square feet. Is this some sort of a
What?
state state definition, or where does this come from?
It comes
No.
from the town of Tyngsborough.
Yeah.
This this got adopted by the town somewhere
Okay.
along the line.
So the high school could have a bank, that kind of thing, and an ATM.
I think that's what this was getting at, Jess.
All right,
Yeah.
that's fine then, thank you. Let's see,
Just so everybody knows, the Voc does have a bank. It also has a CVS,
oh, okay,
and it has 2 internal stores as well.
okay,
But those are clearly accessory and subordinate to the educational use of the facility.
Yeah.
Under lounge or pub. It says any facility other than a restaurant. Can't a lounge or a pub have food? In fact, I thought they had to, or didn't have to, but I thought that was okay if they did. Is that something that we might wanna add to this? That it would be all right for them to serve food, or?
It's not required for them to serve food. So for example, we have some breweries that don't serve food. When we give them the liquor license, that is a consideration as to
Okay.
whether they serve food, but it's not required.
All right, so we want to leave that one alone then. Personal service facility. Well, we actually, before that, we've already talked about the motor vehicle and full service gas station and the motor vehicle service station, which are essentially the exact same definition. Do we want to talk about that right now or no, or?
Well, I guess the question is, would this definition either as written or as tweaked? Well, so the first question I have is, you have this you have two categories in the table of uses, motor vehicle and service station, and then you have self-service gas station. What's the difference? I mean, how many gas stations do you have that don't have self-service these days?
We have some.
But, you know, does it make, I mean, as a use, what difference does that make?
Right.
I think the difference there was that for the ones that have a garage and doing repair is different than, you know, the mobile on the run that's doing the self-service for, you know, pumping your own gas. I think that's what it was for. Now, whether we're doing different uses and having different stipulations, that's the way I interpreted it. Was the motor vehicle and full service gas stations are the ones they have a garage, they do repair, they may only pump gas and not allow you to do self-service. And then you've got these others where there's a self-service gas, and then there might even be something where it's in between. They have self-service on the gas, but they also do, you know, repairs and things like that.
So I'm fine with having two definitions, but right now, motor vehicle and full service gas stations and motor vehicle service station,
Station. Yeah,
almost exactly the same definition.
that's right.
So maybe we need to look at that and figure out how we want to reword that one.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on to personal service facility. So towards the very end of this, the second to the last thing has pet grooming in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think pet grooming would belong somewhere other than a personal service facility, the way everything else is in this particular one, this definition. So I think we need to move that somewhere into kennels or pets.
Well, pet grooming, you know, may be associated with the kennel, but there are certainly plenty of pet grooming places out there that people would consider a personal service. I mean, you're not boarding your dog there. You're not leaving them there. You're simply taking them for grooming. You leave them there for an hour and a half and you pick them up.
Yeah, they get washed, they get a haircut, just like humans.
Yeah, do
Okay.
they get treated different? Like either from a board of health standpoint or what we might allow. I mean, whether I'm getting my hair done or my dog's getting a fluff and buff, are they treated differently? If they are, then we would have a separate in there, but I think they're the same.
That's a health regulation question, not a zoning question.
No, I meant more from a zoning standpoint. Do we do anything different with them? I don't think we do. I'm
Yeah.
floating that question because if we don't do anything from a zoning situation differently, then
I don't know why you would.
Well, I guess
I
my,
agree.
my comment was, if I was looking for pet grooming, I would not look under personal service facility. Maybe someone else would, but I would not. I would like to see that somewhere under kennels and so forth, or in both places, maybe.
So is the question between daycare and the grooming? I think is that the daycare, the concern is the environment and kind of contamination versus the grooming, which would be a short-term event. But the daycare, there are restrictions on where you can place, where they can go to the bathroom, how it's cleaned up, how the soil is monitored. That there is a distinction in the use.
Oh, absolutely. I think, animal daycare, so-called doggy daycare, is very different from grooming.
Yeah, so I think the dog grooming is best in personal service, given what we're doing and how we zone. But doggy daycare and kenneling, totally different.
Yeah, those are a class unto themselves, and it comes up all the time in zoning, all the time.
Okay. Retail store. So with retail store, it talks about allowing garden centers and greenhouses to have things outside in open air display. But I've seen plenty of stores that also have things for sale that are also stuck outside on the sidewalk. Is that in violation of our bylaw, or should we make some sort of a change to this definition? Because this just says it's within the building
Mm-hmm.
unless it's a garden center.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's sort of a question for the committee as to or how it fits in with the bylaw, so.
Well, that is a question. That's a good
Mm.
question, Chaz. Because
Mhm.
it does limit outdoor displays to just a few things, a few types of uses, but like you say, it's not uncommon for all kinds of retail use to put displays out on the sidewalk in front of the
Right.
store or whatnot, and so.
So I
you
guess
address
something that
that or just ignore it,
well, I think maybe that's something that the committee can think about, and we can discuss it at another time, but that stuck out to me, and I thought, well, all right, what's going on with this? So,
Mm-hmm.
under storage, it really, I think that particular definition needs to have a better title for it. Because storage also to me is storage units, and obviously we don't want to have motor vehicles and other things in storage units where you're storing gasoline and so forth. I think that's already prohibited, but maybe a different term, a different heading for that would be something that you might come up with for us.
Yeah, because Chaz, the warehouse and mini warehouse is typically where we talk about those, like the self-storage units or something like that. I think those two definitions. You're right. This one's stuck out to me too. It's a little odd. Just the definition of what storage is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it can be a reference also back to the warehouse section, just so it's clear. Because sometimes people will go and do a search on our bylaws for storage and they'll end up in this section. They'll be like, what does that mean?
Right.
Well, interestingly enough, storage in your table of uses is prohibited everywhere.
Yep.
Now,
I just noticed that. So,
well, then maybe the definition needs to be expanded to cover our table of uses better.
yeah, so the question that pops into my mind is, are there things that fall under storage in some manner now that actually happen in town, even though the bylaw prohibits them? Because, people store things. Um, this looks like, to me, the dump, the salvage material, the motor, tank, I don't even know what a tank farmer, what's a tank farmer?
Got me.
I didn't know you could grow crops of tanks, but, I don't know what that is. This is like sort of, the kinds of uses that are toxic or, environmentally unsafe and things like that, as opposed to a mini storage warehouse.
This appears to be all external outside storage, and a tank farm would actually be something where they would have tanks of liquid
Right,
substances
propane.
for storage to be reused or reclaimed. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe we could create two definitions. One to address the mini warehouse type of storage, and one to address this outdoor storage of
Mhm.
environmentally unsafe things.
Scrap materials. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Can we go back to the solar section just above?
Sure.
So we've got the, I think you added a solar charge station. If I could possibly make a suggestion also for an energy storage facility. Those are starting to come online. That would be an energy storage facility, battery or other devices
Yeah.
in the future. We would probably want to have that, a clear definition of that, and also add that into our regulatory later on.
That is coming up more. I've had this come up in a couple of towns now.
Those are the commercial developments for grid storage. They're not really connected to the power wall or a personal use storage unit.
Right.
Yeah, there's been at least one, if not a couple of court cases recently
correct.
on that very topic, so
That's correct.
we will look into those.
Yeah.
To guide us on what we could write for, your bylaw.
All right, so the next one I have is under tree removal. And it's the final subsection, which says tree clearing plan. And that definition has nothing to do with a tree clearing plan. It should be something similar to a landscaping plan, which would show what trees are gonna be removed, what trees are not, what trees are staying, and so that definitely needs to be fixed.
Vegetation clearing permit,
Well,
different title.
yeah, I mean, really, the tree removal, the bylaw that we passed was really just to stop clear cutting, as you remember. And we wanted to have some sort of a plan that we could look at going forward if somebody was coming in with, a house or a business or something that would show what they're gonna take out and what they're gonna leave. So that was the purpose of the tree clearing plan. Because there's also language in it that says that, if it's a big tree that's coming down, well, you're gonna need to replace that somewhere else. And although it wouldn't be a big tree in our lifetimes, but, so at any rate, there should be a plan, and obviously this definition for a tree clearing plan has nothing to do with a plan. It's sort of, just a understanding of what exactly is vegetation and so forth. So,
Well, as I read this sitting here, the way I interpret this, because it's a little awkwardly written, but the way I interpret this is it's not the trees that are being cleared, it's the understory vegetation. Because it says tree clearing plan, understory vegetation, and it says small trees, shrubs, and ground cover plants growing beneath and shaded by a canopy of trees. I interpret that the plan was to show what's being cleared under the bigger trees. That might be it.
but I'm not seeing
And so-
anything in the definition that refers to a document that is gonna show that.
Yeah, so this is, like you said, Chaz, more in nature of a landscaping plan.
Mhm.
It's kind of a pre-landscaping plan in that it should show what's coming out as well. That was the understanding when we put this thing together originally. And I'm not sure where this came from, so. That's the last one that I have going through this, so. I didn't read every single word in here, but I read enough of it to come up with those suggestions for that we should be looking at and discussing.
Well, it's very helpful.
So that's my 2 cents. Anybody else, any thoughts, or has anybody else looked at this, whatever? Eric?
I guess the question I had, because the initial thing that we were looking at was, did we want to, our next thing to look at the definitions? And I think Bob identified things that are clearly wrong or omissions or things that could be deleted. And I think that is a good thing. And we've, gone into some other areas. What I wasn't sure of is, and I think the others in the committee would probably have a better feel for this, is since we've made changes to the zoning bylaws over the last few years, and we've made quite a few, are there any things that are still areas that we should shore up? Because I'm just wondering, are the definitions kind of that last thing, or are you folks still running into some areas that we need to shore up? And would that be a better use of their time? Because we have a limited scope that we have available. And my
Right.
guess is that the definitions are probably low hanging fruit in that area, but I just didn't know whether other members from the committee were seeing other areas that we should consider shoring up, either as part of this or, as a next step item.
Well, I would agree with that, with what Eric just said, and there is one thing that, I think is at least a minor annoyance for many in Tyngsborough. I've certainly had trouble with it, is I think we should have a definition of what a small or an unbuildable lot is. And I think there should be some language somewhere that says what you can and cannot do on that lot. Or language that just kicks it to another authority, like the zoning board of appeals or etc. But I know for a fact that when we changed town attorneys, what you were allowed to do on a small lot changed with the attorneys, because the attorneys were interpreting the zoning. Each attorney interpreted things differently. I know the building inspector has his own interpretation, which differed from everybody, and there's just nothing around that gives anybody any guidance on this. And if you're on Lake Muscuppick, at least as I am, there are small lots everywhere. So I know in my area that there are 10 or 15 small lots I can think of, just here. I'm not sure how many else there are, in town, but I'm thinking that we should give some guidance as to what can be done or not.
Well, there certainly is some guidance from the state, Larry, about frontage on the street, actual size of the lots, those kind of things. Those are all state regulations, which certainly help, but I understand what you're saying. So,
If you asked the town if you can park a car on a small lot, no one knows. You'll actually get a variety of different answers from different people on something as simple as that. Can I park my car on my land? No guidance. And it does create, I know of multiple examples where this has created unnecessary conflict.
So a couple of thoughts. I mean, the committee's gonna have to make up its mind at some point as to what you want us to do with the money left to do it, or else add some more money to the pot. But and specific to the undersized lots, they're all non-conforming lots, and Chaz is right, there is some language in the state statute about that, but you have language in your non-conforming section of your bylaw. So that would be a starting point. What does the language in your bylaw say or not say about what you can do with a small lot, or more appropriately, what the zoning board would approve or could approve in terms of modifying a non-conforming lot or using a non-conforming lot in different manners. And I don't know what language you have in there, if any. Some towns have very little non-conforming language. Other towns have a great deal of non-conforming language to address a lot of the issues that come up. In terms of parking cars on lots, off the top of my head, I don't think I remember ever seeing a bylaw that had language on that, except bylaws that prohibited parking in the front setback, which is not an uncommon part of zoning bylaws, although it can be controversial for small lot properties. But so there'd be, you need to look at both the state statute and the town bylaw about what can and can't do, and then decide what flexibility you want to give the zoning board to allow someone to do this, that, or the other.
To get back to the original question of is this the best way to spend the remaining funds? We seem to have already put some work into this, and I would like to have this be the focus for town meeting. I guess the other question would be, would there be any additional funds that we could leverage out of NEMCOG or the state or the town to continue this deep dive into our zoning bylaws, to have Bob and Judy continue as we try to perfect these, or at least bring them up to code and law?
Sure.
I know that Colin or Eric, you would
Yeah.
have an answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think, to Chaz's point, we've kind of gone down the definitions road right now. And certainly in talking to Bob, this is something that not only fits within the remaining budget for this specific work, but very likely could be accomplished ahead of the Maytown meeting. I think the more complicated we make the review, the less likely that is. To your question, Chaz, about additional money, if before this committee adjourns, and it doesn't even, it could be after we've overspent and Bob and Judy aren't in the meetings, if this committee came up with specific areas it want to focus on, we could develop grant applications focusing on specific areas of our bylaw. And every year NIMCOG asks us for the DLTA technical assistance program. So yes, we could. I mean, I think it makes sense for us to finish my recommendation, finish the definitions now, and then under separate agreement with the Barrett Planning Group, Judy and Bob, with the grant funds, then identify, maybe it's 2 or 3 more complicated areas that you're going to want to get broader feedback on. But I think for the time constraints that we have, given that, we're already now almost in February, I think focusing on definitions, closing this out, and this group is still active. Your charge goes until June of 2025, and the select board could choose to extend that. But I think that's probably the best approach right now.
Yeah,
Then
and to be
let's-
clear on that, I think we should keep it simple with the definitions. I think it's a limited scope. I think we hit the low hanging fruit, the things that are overtly needing change. For some of the ones where we're going to, similar to what we did before, right? If we're going to be making substantive changes to definitions, restricting certain things, or getting into new areas, I would I would put those off as something that we would do as a future thing where, for example, let's say the planning board says, hey, we've got a problem, just like we've done before in the past, right? Either ZBA or planning board says, hey, we've got some things that we need to tighten this up, or the regulations are changing or something, and then address them there. I think for this one, we should just hit the ones that are missing, and we're not radically changing the definition. If we're going to say, oh, I forget which one we were talking about with the storage, right? Tighten that one up, but be careful, because if we make substantive changes, then it's up for a lot more debate at town meeting.
Yeah, agreed. And if we can, look at some of the issues that are in the graph that Bob gave us, and come up with some stuff to try and fix those, I think it's a win-win all the way around to focus on that. So, so let's stay on course with the definitions, and we can address some of this other stuff later on, because I know every meeting that we're at with the planning board, we're always shaking our heads going, we really need to focus on this and take a look at this and see if this is the best. And I'm sure it's the same with ZBA and conservation and everything else. So, yeah, let's continue down the path we're going on. Bob, anything else that?
Well,
any
I'd like
other
to just
guidance or-
follow up on what you just said. If the planning board and the zoning board could start writing down
Yep,
those problems that you are finding and, shaking your head at and saying this needs addressing, or there's something wrong here because it's in conflict, or this doesn't make sense, or some specifics. Then if you do get some additional funds, the committee and the planning board and the zoning board could look at that list and say, okay, what's the priority? What two things on this list can we pick off? And we can go back and look at what some of the other items were on your priority list as we went through the recode, and then you'd have, a more complete visual of what the problems are and
Yep.
which ones you want to attack first. So that would be really helpful if the two boards could do that. Or
Yep.
anybody else, the staff and, even the select board, or, could jot
Yep.
down anything they find as problems.
and we can certainly put that list together and give that to Colin to send off to NEMCOG or whoever, we can get some funding out, so.
And one other thing, Chaz, if I
Yes.
could, this is directed to Colin.
Yep.
Colin, when we talked in December, you indicated that you might put together a revised, updated contract. And I know you're a busy man, so if you don't have time to do that, I mean, we can do that as well.
I will get you one tonight.
What service? Wow. You're gonna get a 10 when I do the review of the town of Tyngsborough government,
Excellent. And I'll let you know when my review is with the select board. You can call in and
Yes,
tell them that.
yes, okay.
So Colin, let me
You're
know. if
breaking
you
up.
need us to pick that up, because I can do an amendment too if you want. Just let me know.
All right, it'll take me 10 seconds. I'll get you one tonight. Thanks for the reminder,
Okay.
Bob. I did promise that a bit ago.
All right, is there anything else we need to discuss tonight?
Yeah, if I could just make a brief comment. Yeah, Bob and Judy, thank you for attacking this. I think this is kind of like a high level, same deal what we just did with recodifying. It's all about modernizing what we have in these. I've gone through a lot of the definitions, and there's just some weird ones in there about like the building trade shops, how they explain what that really is. I think that can be updated. There's weird things in there like the flood hazard boundary map that gets very
Yeah.
detailed on calling out a specific map that you might want to check out, because it just seems like it might get outdated if that was done in the 80s and maps get updated. Weird
Yeah.
thing in there about low income and what that really means, just to see if that matches the real definition of what low income actually is. Rifle range, is that a gun range? Is that just need to be updated, like a term like that? Municipal use, that was another one I saw that I didn't agree with the definition. I agree with Joe about the battery storage systems, or whatever we want to call it, whatever that definition ends up being. and the storage part I agreed with. So the accessory dwelling units, is that essentially going to replace the temporary independent living quarters, what we call it in our bylaw? So we would get rid of that term? Do you
Well,
know?
you have to be able to provide for an ADU that's a protected use, that is consistent with the new amendments to Chapter 40A. But there's nothing that says you can't have something else, as long as you are providing for a protected ADU. So, I mean, there are communities in Massachusetts right now that have ADU bylaws that, that have like a larger area than 900 square feet, but they require owner occupancy. So as long as they have a bylaw that says you can do as a right 900 square feet, consistent with 40A, there's nothing that says you can't have something else that doesn't conform, but you have to have a way for someone to do an as of right ADU.
I
mean,
guess I'm just one, yeah.
we have towns on the Vineyard and the Cape that have like guest house definitions and so forth, and those aren't going to go away, but they have to provide for an as of right ADU. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering if that term that we use, temporary independent living quarters, if it just makes it clearer to get rid of that and it is accessory dwelling unit at that point. I don't know if that is a wholesale change, easy to do or not. And
Well,
then
that's a
ahead.
conversation with the building inspector possibly, because there are issues among building inspectors in Massachusetts right now about ADUs and what they constitute under the building code. So if you have sort of the temporary, in-law situation where it doesn't have its own separate entrance, it's really connected to the dwelling unit. It's not, there's no separation between the unit and the house other than, a typical interior door. I wouldn't get rid of that.
Because we kind of got rid of that. Well, like we redid the definition of what a temporary independent living quarters was. We just
Yeah.
worked on that. And that's why I'm thinking, because that was the intention that we had before, but we changed it. We made it easier for it to be like a by right issue as well. So
Yeah,
just something to look at.
It clearly says it's located within the primary dwelling. Have separate bathroom facilities, but for temporary occupancy of another individual.
That's
Just
not
those
an
items mean it's not an ADU.
Right.
So ADUs can also be a garage, a separate structure, right?
Oh, yes,
Because-
they can.
Yes,
Right.
it can, yeah, yeah.
It can be a backyard cottage. It can be an apartment above a garage. It can be part of the house. But the point is, it's a totally separate dwelling unit.
Yeah, so I think they're not in conflict from just this quick look at these.
And last thing I'd advocate for more grant money. I think we could use some help in some pretty large areas. It just came up in front of the planning board last week where we had the mixed use overlay district that we have an issue with, or we've had issues with in the past, just making it developable according to the way it's written. And so somebody's looking at that section right now of the town, and I think that could use some help. Big time.
Yeah, that was definitely on the priority list through the recode as well. That
Yeah.
came up multiple times, but that is a bigger issue. So that's why it didn't get put up number one here for this. But that if you could get more money, then that could be tackled. But clearly that seems to be a priority issue.
All right, anybody else have anything for Bob or Judy to? All right, well, when we want to get together again, then would be the next question.
I guess
How
I'd
does,
start by saying, Bob, how much time would you and Judy need to kind of look at some of the items that were mentioned today?
I mean, the terms that need
Yeah.
to be cleaned up.
I don't know, I mean,
Well, some of this would be pretty easy. It's just cleaning up some things. Some things we're gonna come back to you with questions. Okay, do you want to do this? Or do you want to do that? And then when we review the definitions one by one, we're gonna come back with some edits. And, is that edits on 10 definitions or 25 definitions? So, it's gonna be probably a couple of weeks anyway, at least.
Okay.
Colin,
you
kind
wanna-
of backtracking from town meeting, what does that look like to have everything done and through the planning board as far as advertising and all that?
Yeah.
Recommendations.
I would, out of an abundance of caution, I would plan to have something, even if it's not the total final version, I would plan to have something by the end of February, first week or two of March.
Okay.
I'd feel much more comfortable if it was the end of February. So if, maybe does it make sense for us to look at meeting 3 weeks out on February 11th? There's a conservation meeting that night, but if we do it at 6, I can.
Judy and I can't do that date. We have
I
a
was
Okay.
trying
public
to,
hearing
what
in-
is, do we have
we have a
another
public
meeting?
hearing in Bedford that night.
Oh, that
Yeah,
sounds
that's right.
exciting.
I was trying to remember what
We
it
could do
was,
the
Bob.
13th. What about
Bedford.
the 13th? Well, that's true. You usually meet on Tuesdays, right?
I-
Yeah.
I will be completely out of commission, the 12th and 13th.
Well, I'll be around, but I mean, if you want to meet that week, that's the 11th is the only night I cannot make it.
There's a select board meeting on the 10th. Could we do something on the 12th?
I can't, but it's up to Bob. I'm gonna be working on the Cape and Islands area for almost that whole week after Bedford.
Well, so I guess it's kind of up to you, Bob, if you want to try and do this without Judy or not. And is that soon enough for you to get things together, or?
Well, Bob, are we in Bedford in person or are we doing that on Zoom? Because if it's on Zoom, I think we could meet with these folks earlier.
Well, the Bedford planning, that meeting starts at 7.
Right.
But I don't know if it's a Zoom or in person. So if
All right.
we could, if it's a Zoom meeting, we could meet, if you all could meet earlier than 6 o'clock, maybe meet at 5 o'clock
Yeah.
on the 11th, that would be maybe possible.
Yeah, I can email Tony tonight.
So perhaps I'll hold that, and when I hear back from Judy and Bob about if that's a Zoom meeting, I'll communicate with the whole group to confirm.
So option 1 would be on the 11th at 5 o'clock, and option 2 would be on the 12th at what time? 6 o'clock? Or your normal meeting time?
Sure.
Then Colin, you had said you really kind of thought we should try and wrap things up by the end of February. Are we looking at the 25th in that case?
Yeah, I mean, if you still were meeting very, very early in March just to put finishing touches, we could have started the advertising process with the planning board and be okay. But I wouldn't want to cut it much closer. If you're still in the middle of March finalizing things, we'll have a bit of a problem.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I'll put together a draft schedule for the planning board hearings. So we'll have that to discuss at your next meeting.
Okay, that sounds good.
So I would say we will know, Judy and I will know better sometime early in, I'm hoping, in the week of February 3rd. Do we have a lot to bring to you? Or do we have a medium amount to bring to you? Or do we have a few tweaks here and a few questions here? And that might give us a better idea of, can we get all that done in one meeting? Or are you gonna have to have two meetings and then you're starting to push it into March, closer to March?
Okay,
Well, and we'll let Colin know that.
all right then, so we'll wait to hear back from Colin. I guess that's it for tonight. I get a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, by saying
Aye.
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 Thank you all so very much for your time tonight, and we will wait to hear from Colin, so.